and welcome to our webinar on undertaking an MCI audit. This webinar is hosted by Comentelli, which provides competitive and market intelligence solutions to the customers worldwide to help them turn data into insights so they can make better business decisions. Our webinar today will be led by Gabriel Anderbjörk and Kari Syria.
Dear audience, thank you for joining us today for this exciting session. You have maybe noticed different titles in the social media, for instance, that we are going to discuss here. How do you get more out of your MCI efforts? How do you debate potentially the validity of any audit that you might make? And for these purposes, we have one of the leading experts at the seniors of this industry, Gabriel Anderbjörk, here today. My name is Kari Syria. I am the head of Comentelli's Ambassadors Network with the duty to bring you once a month the leading brains of this industry to challenge and discuss and debate these topics that from very practical angle, how to make your life easier as a market and competitive intelligence expert. So without further ado, Gabriel, you are famous author of this book, A Gardens of Intelligence, that we are about to discuss here as part of the concept. How did this all start? You have quite an extensive CV.
Okay. Ari persuaded me to bring this slide with me. Otherwise, I wouldn't put it on. But yep, this is me. I have background in both technology, banking, and information. And I think that if there is any sort of red thread, if you like, through this one, it's the information track that we're going to discuss today. I started interesting myself in that already when I was at the LBS many years ago and dug into the mixture between microeconomics and strategy and started wondering, what is information worth?
So your background is very much in information, but you have also some sector in the financial sector. What is it worth? So measuring it in terms of where is the money? How does it make financial sense?
Yes.
But in the recent years, you have also been engaged a little bit with sustainability, with the ESG questions. How do you see that?
Well, it started with as you can see on the slide, I'm old Comentelli as well. I was part of founding the company in the late 90s. Then I set up a new company in 2019 that was also working together with Comentelli, of course. And one of the core interests was the information management and information automation in the upcoming ESG regulatory world for the financial market. And of course, now we have the CSRD market, where all industry companies need to comply at the latest next year. So we're looking into that kind of information modeling and information automation for that sector as well. And that brought me into the current project also that I'm working on, which is completely new to me, but that is recycling plants, real hardware, not information. Well, it's information as well, but really hardware plants for recycling plastics and other types of materials. So that's really interesting.
So both from the sense of big corporates and global projects, as well as the smaller companies, Gabriel, together with the co-author and other founder of Comentelli, Jesper Martell, have created the book, Gardens of Intelligence. And the idea here is not just to promote the book, by the way, which is available from Amazon. It is to discuss how the learnings from those big corporates can serve also smaller companies, that you do not waste your money, resources, and time when you go forward. And think about that. It has something to do with strategy, I suppose.
It does. Okay, that's a good segue. So let's start the actual presentation. Thank you very much for listening to that waffling from us. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is really the question of where are we heading? How can we plan for evolving our capabilities, if you like? And I want to start with one just statement. We all know that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. And wherever you look, we want to move ahead. We're curious as a species, and we have a tendency of believing that the future is always brighter. I know that there's a lot of people out there right now that as we are right now in the world is doubting that, but I'm sure it is in one way or the other. But as this is some sort of fundamental human attitudes, we need to think about that when we plan our developments within companies, when we plan change management, what we're going to talk about is much really a part of change management. So where we're heading need to be preceded by the question of where are we? And what we want to do today is to discuss what do we mean by where are we? I mean, it's a very simple question, but what do we really mean with it in terms of evolving an operation such as MCI?
And that's the checklist, the audit to check that in what condition you are before you start to run the marathon and what is needed, and do you even have potentially legs, or do you even need legs? So that's a metaphor analogy. Other one could be that if we want to travel to Mars, the planet Mars, do we have the fire rocket? Will we survive there? And not only where we are heading at, the future direction as a strategy, but can we, in the beginning, is it realistic with these resources we have to even get there? Should we first fix our brilliant basics? And now I urge you, dear audience, to whatever Gabriel and me are saying here, write to the chat and comment us also after the session, and we very much welcome your debate. But when we analyze where we are, Gabriel, there might be many different point of views and angle to that. Some people will look where are we geographically, some people where are we financially. How do you divide, slice and dice this where we are analysis?
Well, when I do strategy work, I develop the strategy sort of into two major component areas: the resources and the capabilities of the company. Very often when you discuss strategy, you run into organizations that look entirely to the resource base. What do we need to acquire? We need to acquire new facilities. We need to acquire, yes, what do we need? We need money. We need personnel. We need a strong brand, which is kind of intangible, but still it's a resource. If you know how to manage your brand, you can have tons of sort of leveraging and payoffs from a good brand. Trust is another sort of a little bit intangible, but still, if you have a company where you've built a trustworthy culture, it's a wonderful resource.
Like goodwill, for example, sometimes is measured in financial terms, but also information can be tangible in terms of patents, for example, that are registered and trademarks and such.
Patents, I would say, it's not on the, I mean, this is not an exhaustive list. So you can definitely have other resources. I would say patents, it's one of them that would be in its own sort of power here.
So to start with, you need to ask your company, do you have these basics in place, and in what kind of shape are they today? What is potentially lacking and how it could be?
We'll come back to that. The other part of this one is the capabilities, or other capabilities. So when you have your resources in place, what to do with them? And this, again, is sort of an aspect of strategy that I very often see being missed on. Because you have the resources, but how well are we sort of shaped to make the best possible use of them? Processes is one typical example. Do we have the processes in place to really sort of evolve our ideas into products, to take feedback on our brand, to strengthen the brand? Do we have the right competencies in place? You can say that people is a resource, yes, but do they know exactly what they need to do? You could hire me in a pharma company today. You can just parachute me into a wonderful position and you say, here's all the information you need. And I would probably, at least for the first 12 months, be completely worthless because I don't know the pharma industry. I don't know the details of evolving pharma products.
And step-by-step processes that you don't need to reinvent the wheel again.
Yeah, exactly, which is a great risk. So other lists here, decision models, mandates, what kind of quality systems. But as you see, there are 2 points here that I bolded. And that's the difference between the resource information and the capability of information management. We're going to come back to that.
But really, it's not enough to just have the access to some, let's say, Bloomberg financial news. You have to also be able to read and sort it and understand it and so on, like a skills.
Put it in context.
And regarding context, one thing that is missing from your slide, Gabriel, I don't know if you have ever thought about this, but some strategy thinker, I think it was Peter Drucker, said that the culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Does it?
That's the question, that what if on the paper you have the resources and on the paper you have skills? So for example, you have access to some important data, you have some technology, some systems that sort it out, such as Intelligence Today from Comentelli, and you have people who are skilled and trained by leading people in the industry, for example, ICI or CI Fellows, Luis Madeira, you name it. And still things don't happen because there might be the company culture blocking it.
That breakfast, does it come with fried eggs?
That's the question. Can you make omelette without breaking eggs?
We'll see where it takes us. Actually, that question, I will come back to that a bit later, because one other thing that I like to just address before we go down that route, and those are the 3 areas of resources and capabilities that are key to MCI, or Marketing Competitive Intelligence, as that is what we're sort of at the core of what we're talking about at this webinar. Myself and my co-author, Jesper, we claim that the 3 resource and capabilities areas you need to address are those of information, technology, and people. And, you know, very simply, and we all know what information is, right? Information is something that technology helps us process, and we as people are using it for decision, for getting general awareness, whatever. But I mean, the bottom line is that eventually I'm going to take a decision, small decision or big decision, right? But some sort of change that hopefully is going to make the company I'm working for make a little bit more money than otherwise. Technology, okay, that's computers and software, storing, transmitting, manipulating information for the benefit of my analysis and my understanding.
Kind of needed, because people speak oftentimes about information overflow.
Yep.
That they get too much information, they don't manually, humans, be able to anymore process that.
So one role of technology is to filter it.
Exactly.
Make sure I get what I need, but only what I need. The latter one is tricky, because how does technology know that I don't need this? Well, that's where Commentelli comes in, right? Yep, doing a good job. Thirdly, people, us, use the technology to structure information to execute faster and better decisions. Why do I have this simplicity on the screen? Well, just to keep in mind, definition-wise, it is not that complex. These are 3 entities that you need to have a balance in if you're going to evolve an organization working with intelligence processes. You brought up culture. Culture is, of course, very much on the people's side of these 3. The culture is particularly in an MCI operation, it's very important, because if you work with intelligence, your job is really to be a little bit provocative. Your job is to set standards in the organizations, to question senior management decisions. You should always be a little bit on top of, you know, what's going on out there. Are we really thinking this through? Are we doing the right things? Well, this is a strange decision by the CFO of the company, maybe. So you're in a situation where you're always at some kind of, just summarize this picture, exposing risk. You're exposing your thoughts. You're exposing thoughts about opportunities, risks, and there's always this sort of chance that someone out there will say, "Oh, I got you on this one." Which means within those teams, in order to evolve this, we need to build a particular MCI culture. And these are, again, this list is not exhaustive, but these are these bullet points that I found when working with companies. I think on top of it all is allowing for mistakes. Because if you're going to be provocative, if you're going to sort of work with analysis and test the boundaries of what you will eventually get things wrong. That's part of the analysis process. Within the MCI team, that has to be very acceptable. If I make a mistake, you shouldn't run off and say, you made a mistake. You should come back and say, listen, let's discuss this. There might be a different view on it. And then I should accept that, right? So we need to have an ongoing, trustworthy discussion on these different topics that we try to develop for the benefit of the company.
Also, not to go to this tunnel vision, to only think in a one way and one holy truth, to dare to say openly that you might be of different opinion.
Exactly. So very, very open discussion climate. And as you see on this list that I have here, again, it's not exhaustive, but support each other, make sure there's open room for open discussion, trustworthiness in the team. We keep the thoughts to ourselves to the point where we found that now we are confident that what we're saying is as sort of fundamentally thought through as it can be. So a word on culture, but it's extremely important. And you will, if you bring that with you on the next coming slides, you will definitely see how it plays in with the ITP model and how to evolve that.
So again, for the sake of auditing, you might want to audit the strategy part we discussed in the beginning. You might want to audit your information sources, your technology solutions, as well as your people, since you need all the 3, where is your weakest link. But you also might want to tap on that culture, and if not in place, how you can enhance it and make it better.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, what do you do with that data? What do you do with those tools? What do you do with those people?
Yeah.
So
what do you do with those people?
to get best out of it, they need to work ideally together. And here you have some kind of structure for that. You have some images. Would you like to open up this a little bit more?
Absolutely. And it's I'm utilizing the framework we have in the book right now for obvious reasons, but it's not necessarily the only way to see it. What is important is to understand the necessity of understanding the resources in detail in each of the areas that you're focusing on. And what I'm saying here is that as long as those sort of resources and capabilities balances, the different resources and capabilities balances in the ITP framework, all is good. I mean, in the book sort of analogy here, all those are on the same level, as we say, the Sprouts level, which, by the way, for those who haven't read the book, is a pretty good level to be at. You might not think so because there are many more levels ahead, but those who have come to the Sprouts level, they have a good technology in place. They have a good sort of understanding and operation of the information they have. They start to getting a little bit more of the people factor up and running. But I mean, actually, when you're at that level, you're a capable intelligence operation. There's no doubt about that.
So let's just recap that everybody here in the audience are on the same page. ITP stands for Information, Technology, and People, and R&C means resources and capabilities.
Exactly.
And when we speak about Sprouts, it relates to the gardening, so gardens of intelligence books. And naturally, when you want to garden the blossoming flowers, you need to do some serious groundwork first.
Yep.
And here we are. How do we advance from the seeding to actually those sprouts to flourishing? What happens next?
Well, I mean, what we want to say on this picture, first and foremost, as you say, for those who haven't read the book, the analogy is that when you build organizations like this, you really have to do it on a step-by-step level. You have to nurture, you have to, water it, you have your plants, you need to take care of the organization as you're building it. And those three areas, then the ITPs, are all parts of the different steps. But what I want to say here now, it's that as long as those ITP RNC balances, they're fine. But what if they don't? What if you find ourselves in this situation instead, where we have information on the plants level being a really good place to be, lots of information, you have a good command of the external sources, you started sort of managing, if you like, your internal sources, you know that you're sitting on a gold mine of information. Then we have people. They're still on the Sprouts level, but as I said, Sprouts, not bad. Those are the individuals typically that know that we have an information asset on the plants level. But in this example, the technology is on the seeds level.
Does that sound common? You know you have really valuable information from, example, your customer service or your field personnel, and you have people who possess that information and who know you have that information, but you cannot put it into action because you actually lack some tools. Is that the basic problem for many companies?
I would say that's exactly the situation we're talking about here, and it's not uncommon. What is probably sort of stretching this picture a little bit is that more common would be that both information and people are on the Sprouts level, but even that is bad enough if the technology is still on the seeds level. But still, I mean, you could easily have this situation, as you say. We know that we have a wonderful CRM system with tons of data about customers and maybe competitors as well in there. We have other types of internal data sources that we could mix with external data we're bringing, but we haven't got a tool to do it. Where we end up, there we go. I call that a dissonance between the different factors here. And for people, this grows frustration because you could do something, but you can't do it because you're lacking the level of resource technology that you need in order to do something with this valuable information that you're sitting on.
So how do you find the golden nuggets from the haystack? How do you sort it out, filter it out? Is there a platform for that who could sort it for you? Such as, by the way, Intelligence Today that is hosting this webinar today here with Gabriel. Yeah. But can it be the other way around, that you have too much technology and it causes you lots of gray hair because you don't know what to do with it, and it distracts you from searching those sprouts?
Absolutely. I mean, how many times haven't we encountered companies that they have a problem, right? And they run off and buy a piece of software. Ready. Problem is, there's a huge step between identifying problem and making sure that you can implement technology in order to actually address the problem. And we've seen that a number of times as well. I'm sure you would agree with that. So yes, if we end up in a situation where you would have, let's say, the technology on the plants level, information on the seeds level, you roll out a system, you expect people to use it, they start using it, and there's absolutely nothing in there of value. So again, I mean, it's the same situation, but just the other way around.
There is a risk that your software and tools will not get you the results if it's not properly used, if it's not properly implemented, if it's not properly connected.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. So whatever imbalance we talk about here, it's not good. Then I mean, in all fairness, some imbalances are less risky than others. But those two that we just brought up, really much information. I think the one you brought up is actually worse than the one I brought up on top of my head, because what we're talking
technologies
exactly, because yes, because what we're saying, what I was sort of illustrating is that we know that we have tons of information, and there are people who knows how to work with it, but we haven't got the technology. I mean, there's a rather small group of people, after all, who realizes that we're not really leveraging the resources we have in terms of information, right? Whereas what you're saying is that there is an overly enthusiastic team of something that rolls out a piece of software that turns out not to be of a very good service to those who are going to use it. That's even worse, because you can't come back a year later and say, sorry, last year wasn't that good, but now we're better.
Well, there might be also in big companies different departments that have different software. So the critical thing is, can your platform connect to these many different
that through the noise? Yeah.
But as I have understood, not all the animals are equal, even though they are equal, a little bit Orwellian thinking. But similarly, in this gardening process, you don't need to have all these different parts in same portions when it grows up. Sometimes you need a little bit more people, sometimes you need a little bit more technology. How do you choose the right balance in different stages?
Actually, we're coming to that one, but let's take another step in between that actually has something to do with this. And that is, I don't know how many of you listeners right now, viewers, that know about this intelligence wheel. It's an old model that most sort of intelligence functions during the 90s and the 2000s, etc., was built on. There are different sort of tool sets, if you like, for the planning and direction, the collection, processing. When Jesper and I wrote this book, we thought, okay, this is the time to sort of make up, if you like, with this model. It's simply too old. It's sequential, which is the sort of the worst thing with it, because you can't work sequential as that these days.
So it goes step by step, clear process.
As we bounced when we prepared for this, this case I mentioned many years ago, I met with an organization that essentially told me they were following this, to the dot. As soon as you put something into it, it just went on. I mean, the oil tanker went off, even if they came to the processing and someone recognized this question that we posed in, or this direction that we put, is no longer valid. They couldn't stop it. This is just ongoing. And even then, I thought this is not sane. This is not efficient. But anyway, now writing a book, we thought we have to think this through. But
that is quite essential. So many people think, for example, that customer journeys would be linear. People get some advertising. As a consequence, they want to buy something. But in reality, customer journeys are oftentimes like a spaghetti, like a mixed, chaotic thing that people get disturbed, both in the B2B industrial settings. There happens something that is unexpected, let's say a strike in some country. But it can be also in the B2C settings. When you are home preparing food, you hear someone ringing the doorbell and you go there and your spaghetti boils over. So what I'm trying to say here is that the linear model doesn't really match to the realities and complexities of companies.
No, I agree. And I mean, the customer journey is the same. I mean, I've seen very many linear models in that sort of context as well. And whereas they are, of course, agile. I mean, just because you happen to be in one part of the journey as a customer at a given date and time, that doesn't mean that you're not with the same product, can be at 2 steps back again later because new information comes in. So
So you have been thinking about this with Jesper, and how do you address that? How can you make it more agile?
Well, I mean, two factors that we thought about. One was, again, we have to take out the sequentiality of the model. And secondly, we were just missing out on what you see in the center, the core of our web model instead, the organization's vision, goals, and strategy. Because it's again, when we work with MCI, it simply has to be directly connected to those factors at every single step we take. They don't change because we have moved from collection to analysis. Wherever you are, you have to keep in mind there is a corporate strategy that we are there to either question or to support. And from an intelligence perspective, that could be from day one to day two, different answers to. Today, maybe we support it, tomorrow we find something that we're hang on a minute, this strategy is not viable anymore. Something has happened within a major competitor, or there's been a regulatory change, or what have you, that means we need to go back to the strategy makers and tell them that will never happen if you work in the sequential way. Which is also why we just put these circles, if you like, in a web around this core, and said that these are the key areas of MCI that should be continuously ongoing in each of them. But you can be on completely different stages in the processing curation on certain questions and others in the collection of sources.
So market and competitive intelligence, of course, needs to be related to strategy. Yeah. How about this that we discussed earlier about the oil tanker metaphor you were using? There was a famous strategy professor from Sweden decades ago called Richard Norman, who had a book that if the landscape is changing, then the map should adjust. I'm not sure if it makes sense in English, this word, but it basically means that if you have a plan, if you stick to the plan, but the context around you is changing, then the plan is not anymore valid. The map is not valid if you are going with the railway, the train over the railway bridge and the bridge explodes. Well, then don't go there. So how? That's my question to you. That how does this take not only the company strategy into account, but also the external circumstances that change?
I would say very much. And actually, my analogy on what you were just talking about, I don't know what different countries viewers are from, but at least here in Scandinavia, I have this children's tale about that there is a gold pot at the end of the rainbow. And I tend to compare that gold pot with the balance sheet of organizations' customers. And of course, you run out there, you try to find the end of the rainbow. The problem is it's moving, so you will never get there. And that's my analogy for the market, the business environment we're trying to address with our strategies, with our intelligence. It keeps moving. You will never, ever hit the market 100%. So what we're trying to do here is to close the gap between us and our strategy and the market as we see it, the business environment as we see it. And the closer we are, the better we are, hopefully, compared to competition when addressing actual customers on that market.
And how to close that gap, there you can use this process and these different resources of the IPP in your audit. But back that earlier process discussion that as it can be very complex. How do you choose your battles? You have limited amount of money, limited amount of time, limited amount of people. When do you use what cards, so to say? How do you play your cards right in a complex role?
You've seen the ITP model now. You've seen the gardening sort of analogy. We'll come back to that in the next slide. Just bear in mind also that these different sort of capabilities we're talking about differ in those different areas of the web. So for instance, if we look at collection of sources, technology, right? Well, yeah, we have some small fraction of information we bring in, or sources that are human sources, whatever. I mean, the vast majority are online databases, internal content sources, etc. It's a technology job to collect sources these days.
So oftentimes speaking about primary intelligence, secondary intelligence, the tertiary intelligence. So for example, field data, if someone goes to a conference and interviews people, that's the first party primary intelligence.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the most cases, even if we read our normal newspaper, wherever country we are, they are referring to Reuters, who refers to some other source. So there we already the third step. And that all is today collected electronically in a way or other.
So point is, in that field of the web, technology, 95% of the importance. Then we come to analysis and insights. There, I claim the other way around. This is people skills.
And let me challenge you now, Gabriel. Audience, this is the question to you as well. Hands up. Who has used ChatGPT? Many people are saying that AI is taking over the artificial intelligence tool, not only ChatGPT, but others as well, that they are doing the analysis for us, that we don't need any more that people part so much because the technology is taking over. What do you think?
Well, I had a little private chat over Teams with a friend who lives abroad a couple of weeks ago, just after this enormous boom about ChatGPT. And we were sitting there discussing what we were about to do. I said, well, I suppose we just post a question to ChatGPT, come up with a good business idea, execute it, and provide us with tons of money. So not doable, right?
No.
Nope. So what I'm saying is that those GPTs, the OpenAI, and everything, fantastic software tools, the best we've seen in decades in supporting analysis, of course, because you can do many more things now with vast amounts of data. And I think here in Sweden, one application, I read about it in one of our daily papers a couple of weeks ago. I don't know exactly what happened after that, but it was called Palme GPT, wasn't it? And there were two programmers that simply took the open source software and applied it on all the documentation that has been collected on the Palme murder.
So
the former prime minister of Sweden. Yeah,
yes.
Which year was that? Was
it in the 80s or 90s? No,
80s.
Like
early mid 80s.
So for those who don't know, there was a big scandal that shook the whole world when one of the most democratic leaders of the planet, Olof Palme, was murdered. Yeah. And still today, this mystery has not been solved. Now, however, there are some people who are using AI to sort those documents. And was there any information that did they come to any outcome yet, or they're just investigating it at the moment?
No, I mean, as far as I understood from the article, they were doing it more for fun. And there were people out there say, "Oh, this is fabulous! You should productify this. You can make gazillions of money." And say, "Well, hang on a minute. We like put 1 or 2 days of programming into this. We're just doing to see what happens." And I think that sort of encapsulates my view on this. It's a fantastic piece of software, or a family of softwares, of course, I mean, a number of them, that you can put on different types of collections.
So you would say it's supporting instead of making the final analysis.
Absolutely. And I will stick to that. I mean, I've heard that since I started working with intelligent software, that, oh, can your software do analysis? And I said, no. It can visualize, it can sort, it can understand, it can do tons of things to help me as an analyst, but it does not do the final analysis, because in my world, that is putting what I get out of those sort of software tools in context of my understanding of what our company is about to do. That's analysis for me.
So the message from Gabriel to all of you is that, yes, use the AI tools, but don't let it decide for you. The final say is still with humans.
Absolutely. And I think I have some support with research in that as well. But that's my point of view. You were asking about how we then shall work with those the audits.
Yes, capabilities. Like in different stages, you need different amounts. And how do you choose your battles if you have limited amount of money?
Exactly. So we're getting a little bit to the wrapping up of this now. And we've already gone through the models and the way we could think here. And what is important when you then start thinking about where are we going? In our model, when it comes to intelligence, you go from one step to another. That
was a sequential thing.
But when you develop, you go from a sprouts level to plants level, you go, etc. So, and that to some extent is sequential. Even if you go down in the details in the model, you can jump up and down a bit like in Mario. But you really want to follow some sort of strategic development sort of track with regards to those resources and capabilities. When you start looking into where are we, the big sort of central question is, where are we in terms of, do we have a software in place? How much information are we actually working with? Do we have access to our different types of information? How much people are involved? Are we known at all in the organization? Do people use us? Or are we just a team of really enthusiastic analysts that love to do this, and we send our reports to a handful of decision makers? Good for them, but maybe not the best sort of usage of the capabilities that might be sort of hidden underneath this kind of thinking that you're then in that case doing. So you might find yourself, as we saw in this earlier picture, some of those resources are on a planting level, some on the locating level. This is where you need to go through and really make an assessment. And beware here, as I wrote in the paper about this some weeks ago, it's very easy to over-assess your own resources and particularly your own capabilities, because we always like to think that we're pretty good at what we're doing, which is fair. But when you do it in this particular context, be critical, be fair to yourself. Don't say that we have a super duper network of people if it doesn't exist. I would say I've seen that a number of times when working with organizations, and I say, well, we got tons of good people out there. So yes, but do they communicate? Do those specialists do what they do in the context of a corporate strategy, or do they do what they do in context of a very, very narrow mandate area, such as a particular technology or a particular customer base, a particular market, or anything like that? If that is the case, you really don't have a network in place. You have really good skilled people out there, but that is not the same thing.
And that was earlier, we discussed also, remember, in the beginning of this webinar, you have the resources and you have the capabilities. So maybe you have the smart people, smartest people on planet doing potentially wrong things, focusing on a wrong area. And in this, it looks like the people part grows and grows when the organization matures.
Yeah. Listen, I think we actually missed out on the chat question. Shall we see what it is?
Actually, there is no open questions at the moment. But again, dear audience, feel free to challenge us. Feel free to ask questions. Sure. And we will be happy to take them in the end as well. There's one. And there is a recommendation in the chat there, chat box of this webinar, that please do feel free to challenge us.
So what I saw was a one on my screen, and that was the recommendation we had to do to add comments. So, okay, thanks.
But in the beginning, lots of information, lots of technology, little by little growing the people part, and the people should be thinking their role bigger than just their particular task.
Exactly. And that is, I mean, if we look at the model again here, what we discussed in this second planting up to the sprouts is really to get the technology and the information platform, if you like, the context of it in place in order to, in the third phase, and then moving up to that plants level, as we call it, really start involving people in the organization. So the question then, of course, is asking yourself, if I'm at the planting level and I want to go to the cultivating or through the cultivating to the plants level, do we have the means of accessing the people that we want to access? Can we contact them? Are there channels within the company where we can inform them in a structured way of our existence and what we can do to help them in their business?
So does your key stakeholders know that your unit exists? Do they read your reports? Do they have access to those? Do you get inputs from them that is needed? Do you engage them properly?
Now you're even sort of assuming that they have key stakeholders already. That might not be the case. You might have sort of mapped out that we would, well, the potential key stakeholders are out there. And I, as an analyst or head of intelligence or something in a company, I typically know fairly well where they are. But how do I get out to them? How can I actually reach out and say, we have something that is of value for you? That can be, I'm talking about now about the capabilities in the company. If you want to move from sprouts to plants, that's a key capability. And if it's not there, you have to develop it. If it's there, checkbox on that one. That makes it easier to take the step. And you have another part which comes to the budgetary issues. If we are at the locating and we want to move to, we're at the seeds and we want to move to the sprouts, you need a fairly hefty IT budget. Do we have that money or not?
And how do you get that money? Not just the justification that this is a good thing or that we have plenty of data. You actually need to be connected to those people who hold the budgets, who can enable you budgets. And how do you do that? The question is, I would think that you need to be linked to the strategy, like you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. I mean, the only advice that we can give on that is when you want to ask for budgets in different sort of phases in this development, you have to be very clear on, again, where we are today. These are the sort of the strengths we have now. This is what we're good at. We have our capabilities, the resources, we can do this. By moving from sprouts to plants, we need this money, but that will also enable us to do the following. And typically, it's not a very good idea to sort of, how can I say, reduce or aim at getting the decision makers who provide you with budgets to think that it will be a very easy task to do, because one, it won't. Each of those steps takes lots of grit and persistence and everything. And two, it takes resources, be it money or people and hours. It's better to be absolutely transparent about that. Say, we need to invest this in terms of hours and money, and we need to move to this particular sort of capability level. For that, we need to do this within I, P, and T. And again, when writing, if you like, a project plan, it's always good to break it down into different capabilities and resource areas. So it's easier for the decision makers that will eventually, hopefully, allow for a budget to follow the different details of what is it that you really want to address.
So you have a justification on detailed level.
Very much a justification on detail level. And again, matching it with what we have today, because there's so many plans. This is where we want to go. But yes, but from where?
Exactly. Where do we stand? Do you have the brilliant basics in place or not? And that's how shows you that we will not achieve the goal where the management wants to take us if we don't first have the basics in place.
Because then if you don't have it, it's very hard for you to argue, substantially for this is actually the cost in hours and money that we need. Because it's moving from phase one or stage one to stage two. And if we don't know what stage one is, it could be, 10 times the money, not 10 times, but 3 times the money. And your budget managers don't like that. So, now this, for those who've seen the book, there are 6 phases and 6 levels. We're not going to go into the details of each of those. You can find it with some of them on the net as well. But the real point here is when you want to evolve in the MCI chain, upscale, getting better on all these, make sure that you take it step by step and make your audit on where you are before you start thinking about where you want to go. That's the key.
Also, I would imagine that to get the credibility with the stakeholder and budget holders, if they want something and you promise that, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I can do it, without knowing that you don't even have the chances of succeeding since you are lacking the basics. So when they ask you to take the big leap, you say, well, yes, I want to take the big leap, and I hope you can finance it based on A, B, C, D, E, the checklist that has been provided here in this webinar. So we are offering you, dear audience, the tools to make your justification easier. And continuing with that, what kind of questions you think could help that the practitioners here could raise with the management, for instance?
We have some questions. I mean, this is anyway far from exhaustive, but just to give you some examples of where you could start a discussion, if we put it that way. The first one, this is very close to my heart, by the way. This is really what I like to delve into. I could speak about hours just on this question, but do we consider information to be a valuable asset? Do we actually value information as a core asset? In the tactic work, all employees, I've written some papers on this as well. And very often when you come into companies, they don't. It's just there. It's taken for granted. There are not that many sort of content or information strategies. I'm talking on a company level now. This is typically something that within the intelligence community, one have realized. Information is of immense importance, and if we get the right information, the right decision processes, it can really make or break on huge big ticket items. But it's a way of seeing information on a corporate level. Do we agree on this value?
And let's keep a second on this question. And everyone there again, feel welcome to contribute in the questions later. But some people don't want to pay for information. In this market and competitive intelligence world, there can be very expensive subscription to some specific databases or financial data, whatever it might be. And there has been this growing movement of OSINT, open source intelligence, and so on. While they paywalls in some business magazines, people still kind of expect that, well, you get it from the Google. And we all know that no, in Google, you get it maybe from page 19 if you are lucky, and most likely not even there nowadays. There's so many advertising that is popping up instead. So that's the question when you say people don't value the information while they know that they need the information. How to navigate on that? Is that you will say to management, no, I cannot get to the goal because we are lacking the basics, which amongst others is that we don't have even information sources, or we are not willing to invest in information sources.
To be fair, Kari, that's almost a webinar in itself. It's a complex issue. But my favorite sort of argument tend to be, particularly if you have to translate this to smaller companies, but if you're in a bigger company and you're proposing for a big deal and you get the deal, the big question then is, what is the let's say you're the sales guy, okay, and you're just about to send off a proposal, and I have a piece of information, and I give you that piece of information before you send the proposal, and you win the deal. I give it after. Sorry, without that piece of information, you'd never got that deal. What would the value be of that piece of information at that point in the company, at that point in time? And the theoretical answer here is very simple. The value at that point is the gross margin of the entire deal. So if you were just about to sell like 50 million or 500 million euro telecom network equipment or whatever, and you have a gross margin of in the 10% on that piece of information was worth quite a lot in that particular moment. And I used that a number of times to illustrate that if we can build an organization, build an intelligence capability that will cost X. We're not just talking about one person now, we're talking about information strategy and technology and everything. Here we have a cost mass for that. Now, is it likely that this capability that we're building will at least give us 1 or 2 more deals per year that would cover this? And in most cases, yes, there's no doubt about that.
But it requires, of course, that this resource, this information is put into use.
Of course, but that's what I mean. It's not just information in that case. You also need to build the capability of utilizing it.
Yeah.
And deploying the consequences of it. And there comes the intelligence organization to do that for you. But it's one
of the critical questions.
Absolutely. And you have to be prepared for it. But I mean, that kind of reasoning when it comes to budgetary matters for intelligence has, from my perspective, worked quite a few times. But you have to put it in the perspective of those who are looking at the balance sheet and the P&L and saying, well, how does this help? And that's one way of reasoning around it. Do you want to delve more on that?
No. Okay, I was saying you have plenty of other questions.
Yeah.
So again, take a screenshot of this slide. You shall also get the recording afterwards, because here comes the questions that you can put to the management in order to get you justifications in order.
Yeah, it's a bit of the sort of audit-like questions that we're talking about here. 2 questions on the technology now. Do our platforms and applications really support our needs? Usage pattern information acquisition required. Bear in mind here now we're looking at this one. We're talking about usage patterns. In a model I'm working with also that is sort of more digging into sort of even deeper than the ITP, I make a clear distinction between information needs and information usage. Because information needs are very specifically connected to the information I need to understand and close the gap between where we are in the strategy. But then we come to the usage pattern, and they can differ significantly between different parts of the organization, but also with different applications. So am I using the information as some sort of weak signal system, telling me that something is happening out there, but I don't know exactly what it is happening? Then I need to use it in one way, whereas if I'm using it for the regular quarterly understanding of whatever goes on with my competitors, a completely different sort of usage pattern of the information. One need to understand those things as well. Platforms and technology need to support that.
But that's the tricky thing, because as I understand it, and this is an open question to audience as well as to you, is that how do you know if usage can be a good criteria? Because let's assume that use it or lose it. If you use certain tool, resource, information all the time, well, then we can assume that is valuable, it's used, so we should keep that and not cut the budget from that item. However, let's assume that there is some information source that is almost never used, but on a critical moment, for example, that deal that you were speaking in the sales case, there pops up something that will move the needle significantly for the company. that there doesn't come so often input, but once it comes, it's worth more than everything else. So how do you know if you are, for example, slicing and dicing, trying to cut budgets with a cheese slicer or something like that, that you don't throw the baby away with the bathwater, as this expression, that you don't cut the wrong kind of things if you're just measuring by usage?
I would say when I say, then you got me wrong, Kari, because I'm not saying measuring by usage in terms of volume usage. I'm talking about usage in terms of how it's being used. So for instance, that kind of signals that you're talking about would probably end up in my sort of friend quadrant, giving our sort of indication something is happening that we need to bring into the analysis. But a more generic answer to that is that your content industry is very segmented into different types of content providers on the sort of commercial content market. You have those, the big ones, the Refinitives, the Factivas, Bloombergs, etc. Technically, they're to a large extent aggregators, so you can't do much about their pricing. If you're a huge bank, you can do that. I mean, in general, for most of us. And at the other end of the scale, you have consultancies that, they send bespoke reports on questions you put to them. Then you have an entire range in between, like companies specializing in a particular type of industry, providing industry reports on that very specific product range, something like that. Those are areas where you can start discussing pricing. Do you want to buy the reports? Do you want to buy the services? And I claim you need a mix between these source categories. But we're still on the platforms. Actually, you jumped ahead.
Oh, right. But
yep.
regarding platforms, let's still stay on the second. Other thing to think about this is that what people need versus what people want.
Yeah.
And this is not always the same thing.
Nope.
So in this context, how do you see that aspect?
Well, it's of course a definition, because when you do the what do you call it, requirement analysis of platforms, you typically we're asked to shorten it down. Yes.
So we have to come to the conclusion here. So there's some more questions, and let's discuss in the end. But basically, many people want to have the critical information for the particular deal, but do they always need all that? So let's come to that in a minute. Here we have some other questions that are still raising up that can help you.
Essentially, what we're talking about here is really just questions that will help you understand where you are. As we discussed before, who are the key stakeholders? Are our staff truly MCI adept, as I call it? Do they know how to utilize a capability like MCI? Do they have access or means to access it? If they do they know what they need to access, where it is, if they can access it, and so forth? So there are a number of different questions that you might want to bake in to these kinds of audit analysis. Maybe we should just stop there and then listen to our moderator out there and say that.
Yes, so we can leave out to Maleka and you, dear audience, for your questions to discuss this and your comments. But I would like to summarize Gabriel's presentation in the way that it doesn't help how fancy car you have, even if you have the car manual and the right keys to it, if you cannot drive the car. So we need all of that. We need you the car, and we need you the manual, we need you the driver, we need the gasoline for the car, for the information, for instance, to get it rolling. And thank you, Gabriel, for this presentation. And now the floor is open. So Maleka, are there any questions so far for us?
Yes, Kari, given the limited time available, would you be able to provide a brief response to a question that says, are there any sources behind the new version of the presented Web of Intelligence? Where does it come from?
Gabriel was presenting the old way, what was the sequential, and then this new one. That what is the origin of this, and are there some academic sources?
This is the quickest answer. No, it's the originator of that model is actually myself and Jesper. So we came to the conclusion where we said we simply have to modernize that sequential model. So that's Jesper and I. It's us that originated that model.
So it's not linear, it's agile model, and behind it is Gabriel Anderbjörk and Jesper Martel, the authors of the book Hardness of Intelligence, available from Amazon. But you can also connect us directly if you want to have faster response than reading the book yourself. Any other questions and comments, Maleka?
No, not at the moment, but thank you, Gabriel and Corey, for this insightful presentation, and thanks to all of our participants for being here with us today. I hope you all enjoyed this webinar. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us using the email addresses displayed on the screen. We look forward to the opportunity to connect with you again in the near future. Thank you and bye.